Hey everyone,
Hey everyone.
I'm Kiaya, Thrifty Redhead on Instagram.
I'm Caitlin. Did I thrift that closet on Instagram?
And welcome to Flip That Jawn.
We are two full-time resellers from Philly, and this is a weekly podcast that explores the ins and outs of reselling while linking arms with the reselling community to help grow and learn from each other.
We're excited to connect with you and new voices that will help to inspire and motivate you in your reselling journey. Join us as we learn more about ourselves, each other, and our ever-growing awesome reselling community.
Hey Tiny Hand Gang family, what's up and welcome to episode 7 of Flip That Jawn podcast. This month, if you are just joining us from our last episode 6, you will know that this month we are focusing on women and women entrepreneurship, especially in the reselling field. So we wanted to take this month and really shine the spotlight on some awesome people to come to the table and share some knowledge and experience and grow together. So with that being said, Kiaya and I have some special guests coming up and great conversations for you guys in our Reseller Stories series. If you're new here, a Reseller Story series is where we talk and learn from fellow resellers in our community, no matter where they come from, no matter how big, no matter how small, and we have the opportunity to just grow, learn, and of course, expand our circle of network, knowledge, and friendships. So today we are talking with our friend Leah at leahbeingleah over on Instagram. And she's going to talk about everything from being a boss woman in the textile design world to sharing her tips with the Depop platform. And this episode is definitely an awesome peek into that corner of the internet, whether you're scared to go into it or you're intimidated. Leah is going to be dropping some gems and just some great encouragement for you guys. So definitely get your pen and paper ready to go. This is full of awesome notes and awesome just encouragement and laughs and good times. And of course, you know, we had to crack it up for another Philly reseller in the building, so y'all are gonna get some extra Philly-ness today. But with that being said, please make sure that you go drop her a follow and connect with her at the links down below in the description if you are on YouTube, or in the description if you are listening through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're at. Make sure you go check out those links and show her some support and continue the conversation with her, as well as checking out if you guys do need textile work. We will dive into that. So with that being said, let's get ready to be popping and get some extra Philly Jawn in the building with Leah. Hey everyone, and a huge hello. Yo, we have a Philly episode today. The Philly trifecta going on today. Hey Leah, thank you for coming on to Flip That Jawn podcast. How are you today?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me. I can't wait to talk to you guys.
Yay. All right. Can you introduce yourself to the viewers with some fast facts about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Leah. I am in Philly, like was previously mentioned. I have been interested in vintage and fashion since forever, since like high school. I have kind of worked in the fashion industry a little bit as a textile designer, and currently I'm basically just doing freelance and selling on Depop full-time. And yeah, I specialize in like vintage and casual vintage and kind of quirky, easy to wear pieces. And yeah, that's about me.
Leah, can you kind of explain to us what a textile designer is? For those of us that don't know, i.e. me.
Sure. What I was doing primarily, I worked at a print studio, and we were essentially just creating artwork. So we weren't really doing any technical stuff. So if you picture just like a print on leggings or something, we would be creating artwork for that. And then our salespeople would go out mainly to like New York, sometimes to the West Coast. They would take printed versions of that artwork and show it to the designers at I'll just say Macy's or something, a division at Macy's. They would show them the artwork we created. That company would buy the artwork. Once they buy the artwork, they have all the rights to it. And then you'll see it maybe at the store. And their team would put it into repeat and make it printable for their factories. So that was really fun because like I didn't have to do the technical stuff, like putting into repeat, color, reducing, getting it ready for the factory. And then I also worked at Urban Outfitters doing similar thing. And in that role, it was more technical. So we had a lot of like restrictions, budget stuff and design restrictions. Just, you know, it's a bigger company and they have like exact needs. So that was really fun, but just like more technical. So basically a textile designer can range from anywhere to designing like knitwear, to doing artwork, to just putting things into repeat, to all sorts of stuff. But it's a really creative and technical type of role. And like all the artwork that you see from like a graphic tee to a printed skirt to socks, someone created that artwork and it went through a process of being put on that thing.
Question, Leah. Did you go to school specifically for textile designing, or did you go to school for art and kind of went from there?
I actually went to school for illustration at University of the Arts in Philly. And like I said, I was just already so interested in fashion that when the opportunity came up to intern at Urban, I did. And I was like, oh, this is cool. It's like combining art and fashion. And that's kind of like what got me started on that journey.
She said, sign me up, Urban Outfitters.
That sounds dope.
You said that you specifically work or list off of Depop. I know that's your main platform. Is there a reason behind just choosing Depop versus other platforms or multiple platforms?
So when I was working full time, I wasn't really that involved in like reselling, but I did have an Etsy shop where I sold vintage, and it was just mainly stuff that I was just tired of or stuff that didn't fit me. And Etsy was okay, but it was like so slow. Like I would get like a couple sales a month. And since I was working at the time, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like that's the pace I was fine with going at. And then I just was like, I knew about Depop and I was like, am I too old for Depop? And I kept on seeing like ads for it. And I was like, let me just try it. Like, let me just see what happens. And I had like a bootleg Mariah Carey t-shirt that I got. And it's like, this seems like something more for the Depop crowd than the Etsy crowd. Because on Etsy, there's a lot of like true collectors looking for like real vintage clothing. And by real, I mean stuff that's like from like the 50s and even before that, stuff that is more like archival, and like a bootleg Mariah Carey t-shirt, not so much. So I listed that on Depop, and like within a day it sold. And I was like, okay, let me list more things, because it would have taken like a year for that to sell on Etsy versus like a day on Depop. So that's kind of like what got me started. And now doing it more full time, it's the platform I like the most right now, because it's kind of, I don't know, I think they're really like trend conscious, which is something I'm really interested in too. So I feel like it just aligns with my personal interests right now.
So would you say like your personal interest is mostly like vintage? Like why choose vintage? Is that just like what you wear a lot? Like is your closet like full of vintage clothes that you wear all the time?
Yeah, I think for me, I've just always wanted to like be unique. So even growing up, I would like shop at thrift stores because I just always wanted stuff that other people didn't have. And I think vintage can mean a lot to like different people and different generations. Like it's funny, on Depop, like this whole Y2K aesthetic is really popular right now, which is like stuff I grew up wearing and is kind of like cringy a little bit, like the memories. And in some ways, like anything that's like 30 years old is technically vintage. So like, hey, a Juicy Couture tracksuit is like pretty much getting there at this point. So I think for me personally, that's not the kind of style that I love just because I lived it. But I'm really into like 90s, 80s, 70s fashion. And to me, like that's my ideal vintage, and stuff that's like actually wearable. Like a lot of people that collect stuff from like the 50s and before, that stuff is so delicate and you really need to like take care of it, and you don't want it to have holes. You don't want it to be like messed up in any way. But with like stuff from the 70s to the 90s, like it's kind of cool if it's a little thrashed and you can actually like wear it and you don't have to worry about like, oh no, I'm gonna like ruin this t-shirt. So that's mostly what my closet is filled with, like wearable vintage stuff. So yeah.
Oh my God, you brought up the Y2K and I was like, I am not ready for low-rise pants to come back. Please, no. I feel like everyone's like, oh my God, yeah. That's a really interesting point to bring up, where it's just in the eye of the beholder. I think a lot of people think it has to be in a specific thing, but that's a great way to look at it, because what I view as vintage is not Y2K, is like 90s, 80s, 70s versus what is it, Gen Z or whatever. I don't know. I'm not part of that TikTok beef. So but they might view Y2K and I'm like, please do not bring this back. I love that sellers are selling it. And I think there is a plus side to it, because being someone that has worn it, I have experience on how it's probably going to fit, on how it's going to be styled, but I ain't trying to go back to Y2K. I know yesterday me and Kiaya went thrifting. We were both kind of in this like 90s, 80s vision. I know, Kiaya, what did you say last night that you were really inspired for when you were thrifting yesterday?
Definitely inspired to list on Depop. And I've been watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like reruns, and I'm just like, this style, I want it. Like, I want to showcase that style. Like, I was in Goodwill yesterday looking for silk shirts, looking for block patterns, like the different, I don't know. I was just like, I need to see this stuff. And that's like some of the stuff that I picked up yesterday. It was like more so in that era. And I was like, this is all going to Depop. And I was like, thank you, Leah, because you definitely inspired me.
That's a good point too, Leah. I feel like a lot of people want to, vintage is very on trend right now, very hip to have personally or as a reseller. And I think people want to go into that, but they don't really know where to start. I think there's that beginning fear that, is this going to be vintage, or another vintage reseller who probably knows more information is going to come in and be like, no, this is not vintage. You know, I don't really know. It's something I'm still learning when it comes to like double stitch, single stitch. I don't know anything about that. I'm still a baby in the realm of vintage, because it is, you'll tend to see, not to like call anyone on Poshmark, but outside people just be like, oh, vintage. And it's just kind of a term that they throw out. So is there any tips or recommendations that you would give to a brand newbie when it comes to vintage, for what to look for to designate that it is vintage? I know you said that if it's 30 plus that it is, but is there anything else to kind of keep an eye out?
Yeah. I think when you're looking for stuff specifically vintage, you can kind of like, if let's say you're at a thrift store, you can kind of scan the racks, and I feel like certain prints and patterns, like what you're talking about, like fresh prints, like certain prints and patterns will catch your eye. And I mean, sometimes they're going to be new, like recreations, but once you look at that garment, you want to look like, what materials is it made from? What does the tag look like? Where was it made? So if something was made in America, it's probably fairly old. And if something is like I don't know, a lot of polyester stuff in the 70s. If you feel, you can tell when you feel it, you're like, this is 100% poly. This might be from the 70s. And then it's really just like, I just look at the tags. Like a lot of the brand names are really funny from like the 80s and 90s, and they all have like a certain look to them. And you can just, once you see enough stuff, you just kind of can tell. But yeah, I think the most important thing is like feeling it, feeling the quality of the fabric and trying to identify what that fabric is. Like a lot of stuff from that's vintage, it won't be as stretchy as things are today. And then like also sizing, if something is like a large, but it looks kind of smaller than a modern day large, that's maybe a good indication as well. Because sizing was a little smaller in the past overall. That's not like a rule or anything. It's just something that I've noticed. But yeah, that's kind of the stuff I look for. And I'm definitely not an expert, but I've been shopping and looking at vintage for a while. And I think that's kind of the best thing you can do is just be observant and look at what you're picking up, and you'll start to notice things, and it'll just become like automatic. You'll just be able to tell by the little like context clues, and that's kind of what works for me. And as far as t-shirts go, you touched on like the single stitch thing. T-shirts, I'm really like, I'm not a purist about t-shirts at all. Like I follow a lot of people on Instagram who are like, got this Grail t-shirt, like vintage, whatever. And I think that's cool. I love stuff like that. But for me, I definitely wouldn't pick up a shirt that's like a band t-shirt that's from like last year or something. But for me, it's all about the content, and like that's what makes a graphic tee cool, not so much like the like single stitch and all of that madness. Like, but hey, if you find something like that, that's awesome. But I wouldn't be like so focused on that, because at the end of the day, someone's going to be buying a graphic tee or a vintage thing because they like the look of it, or at least that's why they should be buying it. So that's kind of like the stuff I think about.
Just getting ready to ask you, like, what's your creative process with being a vintage reseller? So do you go off of like, if you see something, it's like if it speaks to you, not always by brand. Like, you know, so a lot of resellers shop by brand, and it's got to be, you know, a certain brand because it's popular and it sells. But just because it's that brand, people might not be looking for that style, you know. So do you mostly look like if it speaks to you, then you'll get it?
Yeah, I think for me, brands are interesting, but not the motivation behind what I'm picking up. I think I'm kind of just inspired by like new and old. So like you were saying about like Fresh Prince, if there's something that I'm watching, whether it's new or old, that might just like stick in my brain. But I also look at the runways a lot, because that's just something I've had to do for work in the past, like coming up with different trend ideas and color palettes. So I always try to like incorporate a little bit of that in what I'm doing. And it's important to kind of only look at the things that you really feel drawn to, because if I looked at every single designer on the runway or tried to watch like every new TV show or something, like it would become too complicated. So I try to stick with like, you know, the stuff I really love and see what's going on with that. Like, and then, you know, bring in new references when I really like those references, because I think if you try to just be like, this is popular, let me get this, then you're kind of losing yourself a little bit. But if there is something, a trend I see coming up that I actually do like and I want to incorporate, and I feel like I understand what it's referencing and I feel like I understand where it's coming from, I'll like incorporate that into what I'm buying and what I'm promoting, I guess.
I like that, Leah, because it makes me think instead of viewing, you know, we come from a Poshmark world where, like Kiaya said, it's very brand focused. Like you said before, you just kind of get the view of it. I know what certain brand tags look like. Like I can be like, oh, it's a Free People tag, you know, pick it up. So it does come with experience. But one thing that you said, that you just said that just hit me was the fact that like inspiration versus research. So you can be inspired by things. Lately, I just finished the season finale of WandaVision, which went through different decades. So I was kind of using that as inspiration with different 1960s fashion, and I'm sure they did the same thing to make sure they were staying true to the decade. But my research towards that is going to be a little bit different. So I like that there's creatively you can be inspired, but you can also research. So I also wanted to go back to your point too, when it comes to, I'm coming this from being a new person. Do you feel that since vintage is coming in so hot recently in trend, especially in reselling, do you feel like there is almost a culture of gatekeeping when it comes to vintage? Do you feel like it's a positive gatekeeping? Do you feel like it's a negative gatekeeping? Where do you kind of stand on that? Or how do you kind of help the community when it comes to new people coming into it? And what would you recommend other veterans or pros of vintage to kind of handle that situation?
So I think that's really interesting because I have been buying vintage since forever, and I've bought things from my peers, just like other people like us, who are just cool, chill people. And then I've also gone to like events, like vintage selling events in New York, where it's like very a little more exclusive. The vintage is really expensive, and you're kind of paying for that experience of something being so curated. And it does feel like a lot more exclusive than just buying off an app or something. The event that I went to a number of times is called a current affair, and it's like all the top vintage sellers, all different like ages of people, all different people with like 40 years of experience selling vintage are there. And I think they've earned the right to make their prices whatever they want to make them. Like I don't have a problem with that, because I think with vintage, it's really about, some things have a value, but they only have a value because someone wants it and because it's there and someone brought it there for you to buy. So as far as like gatekeeping goes, I've definitely experienced situations where I'm like, I felt like someone's looking down on me because I don't look like I know what I'm doing, and I'm looking at their stuff and they're like, well, I have X amount of years of experience doing this. And I think that's just one of the quirks of going into like a vintage community. Like there's always going to be those people. And like I said before, in some ways they've earned the right. But I don't think people should feel intimidated by that at all. And I think something I do is like, I always try to answer people's questions about my items. And if I don't know something, I'm just honest and I price it accordingly. Like I want someone to get something from me because they like it and they want to wear it, not necessarily because it's like a rare piece that is so special necessarily. So I think people just shouldn't be intimidated by that. And if you are in that situation, just laugh it off as a quirk of these like eccentric vintage people who sell what they like and whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I also want to point out, I think Kiaya will agree with me too. I didn't mean that to just target the vintage community because it definitely happens in Poshmark, right? We've had conversations where, as maybe you've been doing this for a year, or people that have been reselling for a while, you can kind of forget that you were also a day one person. You also didn't know how to send offers to likers. You didn't know how to list something. So wasn't trying to like specifically come for the vintage. I just noticed that a lot of people that have been doing vintage for a while, and I think that's a valid point because you also worked in an industry. So when you have professionals like Urban Outfitters or something like that, it's a total different approach versus a one-on-one approach. But I think that's great advice because I've definitely been in situations being a new person where I've gone into vintage stores and I've been like, I'll always respect the pricing, but I'm just like, ooh, like, I don't really know. And then I feel like, oh, well, why are you here trying to source things when you don't really know about it, right? But you can't know until you learn. So I would say, especially, I've been told, whether it's vintage, whether it's luxury, right? That's another field that people want to go into but are intimidated by. It's like taking those field trips into different vintage stores, and like you said, feeling the fabrics, looking, maybe even just taking a trip where you don't necessarily buy anything, but you just use it as a, like, okay, how does this feel, or what is the general vibe of, you know, that decade, or what are some brands from that decade. I know I just recently went to a few vintage, I almost want to say like consignment stores, and I liked that they had it blocked off in decades so that I could be like, oh, this is a brand that's from 1970s. This is kind of the style of, or how the silhouettes look on people. So I think I just wanted to bring that up. I think that's a great, and I love that you're answering people's questions and being on this podcast, because we have a lot of people too that they want to go on Depop, but half of it is maybe they don't really know what they're doing. And then the other half is kind of intimidated because it is very on trend. But I know that having interviews like this or just asking questions helps a lot of people. So me and Kiaya both really appreciate that. Right, Kiaya?
Damn right I do. I'm over here taking notes because I'm trying to get into the Depop. Like it's a new format for me, myself, and it's very different than what, I'm used to off of Poshmark and eBay and, Mercari, if you want to say so. But going into Depop, how do you like format your listings? Like, is there any tips you can give me, but also anybody else, but mostly me? Any tips on like how you format your listings? Like, how do you use your shipping methods? Like, just like your day to day, what you normally do on Depop.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just kind of give you, I think that's really good, like a day to day kind of thing. So I have like a little photo studio in my house. I'm using air quotes because it's like kind of, rickety. But it's just good to have a nice clean backdrop. And that's whether you're doing a flat lay, which is when you just lay out the item flat, or if you're modeling it, and you don't have to show your face if you're modeling it. So usually things that fit me, that look okay, I'll model them, and things that don't really fit me, I'll just do a flat lay. And both techniques work really well. Like you can get on the explore page with a flat lay or modeling. And then once I have my pictures, I edit them in an app called A Color Story. It's just a photo app that I have that I like. It allows you to like save preferences and edit multiple pictures at once. So I've tried other photo apps, but they just weren't as intuitive for me. So I'll edit them, and then I start writing my listings. And on Depop, one thing you can do is look at verified sellers and top sellers listings and kind of see how they format them. And you'll usually see that, and you could just copy it and kind of put your own information in there. So I always start off with just one line of like vintage 1970s green cardigan, just almost like a title. And then after that, I'll write like a couple sentences with a little more info about it, with a couple more keywords, not hashtags, but just keywords. So if it has hearts on it, I'll make sure I say has heart-shaped buttons and is whatever. I try not to like over flourish it too much. Sometimes I'll put something funny in there just so people see I'm like a funny person, just trying to flex on them, And then I usually put the listing, the size of the item. So I just measure like pit to pit and how long it is, or if it pants, like go through all the measurements. Because if you don't put the measurements, even if it's something where you're like, okay, it's a large t-shirt, people should kind of have a gist for what that's like. People will message you like, can you give me the measurements? So it's easier to just put the measurements first thing, so people just know right away if they're going to like the fit. And then you're allowed to have I think either 4 or 5 hashtags, which I find really hard because sometimes they're like, make sure your hashtags are really unique. But I'm like, if they're unique, no one's going to be looking for them. And then if you put something like Y2K, well, everybody's putting that hashtag. So it's not like your thing is really going to stand out. But one little trick I've learned is when you're on the Explore page, you might see they have like all wildlife t-shirts one day. So if you click on one of those things, you might see that that person used a hashtag called like into the wild. And then you'll see like everyone used that hashtag. And that might be something that Depop is actually telling the top sellers to put as a hashtag for that week. So you might be able to put that in, or sometimes Depop will tell you hashtags to put in, like gifting with Depop. So just always pay attention, because even if you're new and you're not getting those emails or you're not privy to that information, you could just be observant and see what hashtags other people are using. And then once I write my descriptions, I save all my posts into the drafts folder. And then I usually post like, I don't post that many things a week, maybe like, I don't know, 10 to 15 things a week, like depending. And you're really not, they suggest that you don't list everything in one day. They're like, drop a couple things on Monday, drop a couple things on Tuesday, and etc. So it's tempting to just do it all at once, but it is better if you just do like little drops throughout the week. And I found that usually the beginning of the week is the best for some reason. I just get more buyers from like Monday to Wednesday. So I just try to do throughout that time period. So I think that pretty much covers that.
Love the whole little drops, like not feeling like, because with Poshmark, I felt like I got to do like, okay, my 10 listings a day, I got to do it this way. I got to do it this way. So I like that little drop thing with Depop. Explore page. Is that like the page, like when you first go on and you see all of these random listings, like when you first get onto Depop and like that's the first, like the home page, and then you can make it like on that page based on your hashtags?
I don't know. It's kind of like nebulous how you get on there. Apparently there's humans that actually like look through certain hashtags that they want to promote. And it doesn't matter if you're a top seller, if you just started, if they see a photo that fits the criteria that they like, you can get posted on that Explore page. And to be frank, like getting on the Explore page isn't that big of a deal. Like it doesn't mean your item's going to sell. It doesn't really mean anything. But you will get more followers and more eyes on your page in general. So it's always a nice boost. It's a little motivating to get on there, but it's not like that important or anything. And the other thing I just wanted to add that I just thought of about Depop is just going back to the day-to-day thing and the little drops, is that like most of the users I've found are on the West Coast. So you can kind of think about when you're posting your items based on that. So like for me, posting later at night here in Philly is better because it's like nighttime for them. And I feel like that's when a lot of people are shopping. And like, I get a lot of sales from people on the West Coast at like 2 to 5 in the morning our time. So not saying you have to post then, but just like posting a little later, like you might not want to post at like 9 a.m. because I feel the majority of the buyers are on the West Coast.
That's an interesting thought. And Kiaya, when she was talking about the Explore page, all I could think about was getting host picks on Poshmark, because when you get a host pick, everyone's like, oh my God, like this host picked it. This item's going to sell. And the majority of like 99.9% of the time, if I've gotten a host pick on Poshmark, it's just been, people commenting like, hey, come to my closet, or like, check out the sale I have going on, or I just get comments of like, congrats on your host pick. And I'm like, that's great. Can you press the buy it now button instead? So I feel like in the realm, if you're a Poshmark seller, a good way to contribute to that would be like a host pick. I also want to say, even though they're two completely different platforms with different missions and different styles and trends, there are those similarities. So when Leah was talking about, looking at the categories of things, that would be very similar. And Poshmark does the same thing, where if you go into like the items of the week, if you put in your title like men's rain boots, like Levi's, whatever, if you go into your homepage, like your newsfeed, it will have that. Like Poshmark picks listings with those SEOs in the listing. And that's where you can also get a lot of information if you don't really know what you want to list that week, is where I tend to go to, because they'll pick things in there. I haven't had a sale really from that, but it does give you a good direction of what they're pushing, what the platforms are pushing. So as intimidating as Depop can be for a Poshmark reseller, there are a lot of similarities that you can look at. Like, okay, if I do this on Poshmark, I can do the same thing on Depop. And I think that's kind of cool, because it kind of takes down that barrier for people that are a little intimidated of the platform. There are very much similarities.
A follow-up question with the pictures. So I know Depop doesn't give you a lot of pictures, right? They only give you how many? 4 pictures?
Yeah.
How do you, Leah, how do you determine what picture you're going to put up there? Because I mean, I think I'm kind of spoiled with that. I think it's now 16 on Poshmark. I'm kind of spoiled with like, oh, let me just take a picture of the sleeve like a couple of times just to fill it out. But Depop is like, okay, you have to really like zero in on try to get some really good pictures up there for somebody to buy it just off of 4. So,
well, I think because the users of Depop are aware that there's a 4 picture limit, people are expecting to see like the basics. You know, they want to see the front, the back, side, any damages or stains. I've seen some users for like the damages pictures kind of do like a collage of maybe 4 pictures or something to show, to show like, you know, there's a stain here, there's a hole here. And I've never really done that, but if I needed to. And then the one thing you can do, I don't know if it's in addition to the 4 pictures or instead of a picture, you can add a video. So I've done in the past, like if it was a dress, I'll do like a little spin in the dress so people can kind of see the movement or see like all the angles in a video. And then, I don't know, sometimes people will just like message you and be like, hey, can you show me like a close-up of the sleeve or something? And I'll just take a picture of the close-up of the sleeve, take out one of the pictures. Once they see it, replace it again, which is a little annoying, but like not a big deal at all. So just having the 4 pictures hasn't been a huge problem for me. But yeah, like I said, one thing you can do is do a little collage, do a video, and then just if people ask, just be open to taking another quick snapshot for them. And most people are pretty cool about that. They're not expecting like an awesome photo. They're just like, cool, thanks, you know?
I feel like too, I'm definitely spoiled by 16 photos on Poshmark, because I'll be like, ooh. Like I have a method and a list that I hit, like hem, sleeve. But I think it's also from the people that I've had buy Depop, they know what they're getting, versus like Poshmark. There's always that internal fear that someone's going to open a case. So I'm like, I have to use 16 just to cover my own ass, basically, on stuff where I've never had, so far, fingers crossed, I've never had any issues with Depop. But that also, do you feel like because the platforms are so different, right? With vintage, you kind of assume that maybe there are some flaws to a piece, but it kind of makes it more, I don't want to say trendy, but it makes it more valuable because there's distressing or it has a story to it, versus Poshmark, right? We have people that are mostly looking for brands on trend. You know, people don't want to buy a Gucci bag from last year with distressing on Poshmark, right? Versus you might have a Gucci bag from 30 years ago on Depop and it has a distressing, but someone's into it. Do you feel like having that might play a role into how people view on Depop to purchase?
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point too. Just people who are buying vintage. I mean, everyone has a different threshold of what they think is like wearable condition. And I think if you're into vintage clothing, you kind of know that threshold personally for yourself. And like, I don't usually sell things that are like below my threshold of wearability. But I see people selling things that are like yellow armpit stains and ripped up neckline, but it's a cool shirt and like someone will buy it. For me, like I wouldn't really be comfortable wearing it, so I probably wouldn't buy it. But like I think because the platform is known for vintage, people shopping there kind of are aware of conditional issues that the pieces might have. And I think just everyone being comfortable with that threshold as a buyer and a seller is really important. And just being honest, like as a seller, being like, this is in fair condition, which I think is maybe the lowest condition that you can put on Depop. And I think as long, like you talked about covering your ass, I think like for me, that's how I cover my ass. If I have something that's like, I can't really fix it and I still want to sell it because I still think it's like a valid thing, I'll just make sure like I take the pictures of the damages and I make sure that I list the condition as fair. And I even say that, like type it in as well and just be like, hey, like, you know, this is still totally wearable, but this is the issue, and just being honest.
Yellow armpits, that's gonna be a no from me, dog. Like, I will wear distressed whole things, but yellow armpits, that shirt has already lived a life. And it is not coming into my life. I'm just saying. But in regards to that too, while we're kind of talking about I'm so glad that you are discussing this because it's breaking down a lot of, for me personally, a lot of fears when it comes to selling vintage. Just that valid point. If everybody has a different threshold, you know, I'm willing to pay for like a California raisin shirt that maybe has some holes in it, but I like it. And I'm willing to pay up like the $30-$50 because I don't know. I just vibe with California raisins. I don't know. We on the same level. But like, do you find too when it comes to Depop, another thing I think that kind of scares people from coming from the Poshmark world is the whole shipping conundrum, right? So on Poshmark, we have a general, if it's under 5 pounds, it's what, $760 something, nine, what is it, just went up. It used to be like $759.
It's $759 or $749 right now.
Yeah, I think it's like $759 or something like that. So we just have a general rule of thumb. So I think that always is like good for people just starting because they're not like scared they're gonna mess up the shipping. But is there a standard or a process to your shipping that you would recommend for new people to come in so that they aren't scared of that process on Depop?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that because a lot of people ask me that and it's something I always like forget about. So when I first started on Depop, I just was doing shipping on Depop and I forget what the rates were. But then I was finding that like, because I wasn't weighing my items before they sold, I would say, okay, I think this item is small, like a small item. It's probably going to go under the shipping with Depop small, which was maybe at the time like $350. And then I would weigh the item and it would be heavier than I originally thought. And then they had already purchased the label and it just created this whole issue. And like I would have to ask Depop for a refund, or I would just have to bite the cost and like buy my own shipping label after the fact. And then the buyer wouldn't be able to track their shipping on the app because I didn't use that label anymore. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do my own shipping because I feel like I kept on getting screwed over with Depop shipping, primarily because of my own mistakes. But I feel like there's some things that you can't really predict happening. So it's kind of like weird to like say, okay, this is like the end all be all shipping, these 3 options on Depop. So I don't like to do that. So I use Pirate Ship. So on my listings, another thing I do is I try to buy items that aren't that heavy because I just don't like to deal with shipping like a leather jacket or like a faux fur coat or something, because it's just always going to be really expensive and people don't understand that it's expensive. They just think, well, Amazon ships it for free. So I just don't like dealing with that.
You pay
Jeff
for that in your
Bezos.
membership, guys. You pay for that. I'm just saying.
I use pirate ship, so I just weigh the item after it's sold, print out the shipping label. It's super easy. I print them at home, so I could just drop them off at the post office that way.
A good point. I mean, I multi-cross list. So when I was like, I want to get on Mercari, I want to get on eBay, I want to get on Depop, I knew that a scale was a must-have, and it wasn't even that expensive. I think I got my Dymo like 5-pound one for maybe under 20. It was like $20 maybe at Target, just to cover, again, relevant theme, covering your ass with like that, because it just, you don't want to add more work into it. And I do with the Depop shipping. So I wanted to make sure that it was like straight on there, because I think that they're not as bad as, say, the eBay shipping guidelines. But I do also agree with you, like the heavier items, I'm not trying to live that life. I only have a scale that goes to 5 pounds. Like,
So Leah, when you do your shipping on Pirate Ship, because I use Pirate Ship for like shipping out a bunch of stuff not related to reselling. When you list your item, like, do you already do you guesstimate your shipping price?
Again, I kind of looked at what other sellers were charging for their shipping, and it seemed like, for t-shirts and things like that, most people charge like $5 shipping on Depop. And I kind of started doing that. And even for like West Coast orders, I'm usually covered with that, because like t-shirts are super lightweight, which is like why I like to sell lightweight items. But then there's some items like shoes or things that are heavier, that I will say like shipping is $10. And I am guessing, and there have definitely been a couple times where I've screwed myself doing that and lost a couple bucks, but it usually evens out in the end, because like I'll charge $5 shipping for something and it ends up being like $3.50 or something, and it's generally okay. But I think like once you're familiar with the type of items you like to sell, you kind of get an understanding of how much those items are going to weigh. And then if someone, so I don't know if I'm sure other selling apps do this too, but they want you to do free shipping on bundles, which to me, I would lose money if I did that. So I don't do that. And I've never had issues with people, like, sometimes people will ask and I'll be like, I can't, like, that I have to cover my shipping cost right now. So if they're buying a bundle, I'll just kind of guesstimate like the items in my head and charge accordingly. And usually it's like $10 shipping, $15 shipping at the most for what I sell. But I think it's important, like, for everyone out there, like, don't feel bad for charging for shipping, even though I feel like apps and the world makes you feel like bad for charging for shipping. You're just covering your costs like that. And also you're covering your supplies. You're covering for like your scale, your paper, your ink, your printer, like your time going to the post office, like whatever. So I think the whole stigma about charging for shipping is really annoying, but I think it should just be like, hey, I need to cover my costs.
Now, do you do just US shipping, or do you do worldwide shipping on Depop?
So I have shipped worldwide from Depop, and that's another thing that I find really strange is like, I feel like they want you to just put an overall price for like worldwide, I charge X amount for shipping. But for anyone who's shipped internationally, the prices vary like widely. And so generally people, I think they're used to having to ask like, hey, can you ship this here? And like 9 times out of 10, I say, yeah, I can, send me your address or where you are, and I'll give you an estimate of how much it's going to cost. And like 9 times out of 10, they're like, okay, never mind. Cause it's like probably more than the item itself, but a couple times it's worked out. So I do it, I'm open to it, but I think never put like a base price for how much you ship internationally, like, because you're going to get screwed over.
I'm scared when it comes to worldwide shipping because I know every country has different standards too. Even with makeup, like Europe has a total different standard when it comes to makeup than the US. So you can't even, that won't even go through customs. So I'm just scared on that fact. I'm like, what if I send this California raisin shirt and they're like, not today? I don't know why.
California raisins is killing
me.
What?
So that's an interesting point. Would you recommend right now? Personally, I don't have it set up for international. I just want to build and get used to Depop and just do US shipping. So would you recommend that if you are new to just kind of start there and then maybe incorporate international shipping when it comes down the road and you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. And like if someone really wants the item and they live in Canada or wherever, like they'll reach out to you and you can, figure it out from there. Like I said, research how much it's going to cost and let them know and see if they're still interested after that. As far as what you were talking about with like customs and all of that, I've never had an issue with clothing because like I said, I sold on Etsy before too. And I feel like I had a little bit more like international people on there. But yeah, I've never had an issue with anything like that. But yeah, I think you can also like put in your little bio at the top, like, DM about international shipping or whatever. But
yeah, I was going to go into that bio because I was like, once I got on Depop, people were telling me, like, set it up in your bio, make sure you put your standards. So can you go into a little bit about a bio on Depop, what you should probably put in shop policies and all that?
The little bio at the top it's very limiting. You can't really write that much. I don't even think I have like policies on there. I'm just like really chill. So if someone wanted to return something or wanted a refund, I would just try to figure it out on a one-off basis. And I really haven't had like any real issues with stuff like that. But I think if I ever do get in that situation, I'll probably reconsider what I'm saying right now. But I've noticed that people will put in their bio like no refunds, no trades, no this, no that, which like I don't like that. Because I just like to be friendly in my bio.
I probably wouldn't shop there if I seen that.
Kaya, probably like that low baller chart that
it would turn me off. It'd just be like, oh, I just feel like I'm all about the positivity, y'all know this. That gives me negative vibes seeing no as soon as I see something. I don't like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to the next store.
But yeah. I think that's like wording too, right? I have that in my bio, but instead of like no returns, I just say all sales final.
Yeah.
Which is a more professional way to say it so people know what they're... I mean, I'm willing to work with people, but that's the general standard, again, to cover my ass. I think Poshmark has like scared me in case-wise that I'm just like I just gotta make sure that my ass is covered on all fronts now. All the other platforms are getting me being scared and traumatized from cases on Poshmark.
No, I totally get that. And like, I think there's options on Depop that you can like swipe that will like show up in your profile in the settings that say like, I can't recall what they all say, but they're like different policies that will like show up when someone actually goes to your profile, like free shipping on bundles, stuff like that. I've also seen people who just have a little post that's like about the seller, which I don't have that, but it feels a little friendlier to just be like, this is me and this is like my policies. Cause I kind of want to reserve the bio portion to really say like who I am. And I'm not the app's policies. I'm me. So I don't want that to like, take away from that.
That's a good point. It's almost like a Meet the Posher listing on Poshmark.
I was just about to say that. So you can create that or like they have to give you that?
So it's kind of just like a little loophole. You just make a post and instead of it being like a true listing, you just put your picture or like a little text that says like about the seller and you can just have that at the top of your page. And people will look at it or they won't. I don't know. Like I said, I have not done that just only because I just haven't had to. Most people like get the gist of Depop once they've used it for a little bit, but I think it definitely looks friendly. to do that, which I think is important and gives people a sense of who you are. But yeah, you just create it, and you have to put like a little price still. So people put like $1 million or, whatever. But
Ooh,
yeah,
you think highly of
I'm
yourself.
Know your worth.
Right?
I was gonna say, Kaya,
Jesus.
I'm trying to like string it with Poshmark sellers so that they can kind of see that there are like similarities, and trying to like not freak everyone else about another app. But it'd be very similar if that you were on Poshmark, right? And we make a banner art for like the podcast, or like you have a sale going this weekend, and you would put in that listing like 0 and 0. It's very similar to that. If anyone has done like a sale banner, or
I always put 500. I don't know why. That's just a number. It's
I always
not
put
big.
medium.
Yeah, it's never big. It's never a huge number. Like I've seen people with the 10,000 and all of that stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know why 500. It's just very easy. I'll just keep it at that.
Poshmark always makes you put a size if it's like, even if it's a 0 1. So I always just put medium tops, because I feel that's what I always look for on the internet.
It's always it's because you have to pick a category. So I always pick women's accessories and then zero size, like one size only. Like it's just the easiest thing. I don't want to even be thinking about it. But speaking of like different banners and stuff you can put in Depop, do you run sales? Like how does the sale thing go on Depop? Like I know you kind of mentioned earlier when you were giving like day to day, you tapped into something like a theme a week type of thing. So is that something that Depop does? And if it is, can you like do sales off of that?
Yeah. So with Depop, it's like, some people know about the hashtags, some people don't, whatever. And I think with the sales, for an item to go on sale, for you to be able to put a discount on it, there's like a little tab where you could pull down discount, select the items you want to discount, select how much you want to discount them. I think the posts have to be like at least 10 days old for you to discount it. And it'll show up with like a little yellow tag. So when people are scrolling, they'll know it's on sale versus you just like making the price lower one day. And then as far as like, if you see a theme putting that item for sale, if you're just listing the item, you obviously can't put it on sale because it's not 10 days old yet. But one thing that you can do is just be like proactive, where if Valentine's Day is like a month away, start listing like red items, because they're probably going to do something on the explore page where everything's red and pink. So start listing those items like a month before, just like how stores like list seasonal items. Like you should list seasonal items, so that way when Valentine's Day comes around, those posts will be old enough for you to put them on sale. Same thing with like Halloween, or a good example would be like ugly Christmas sweaters. Like those are a huge trend in retail and in vintage. So if you have that inventory, start listing it like a good amount of time before Christmas. And if you still have some laying around when those things are being promoted by the app, you can put them on sale, or at least you already have them when people are looking for them. So just like look at what stores are doing and kind of see like, okay, seasonally they're starting to put out their St. Patrick's Day stuff. Maybe I should post some of my green things now.
It's the mind, it's your own store, so you got to look at it as your own brand. I'm all for that, whether you're part-time, full-time, whatever it is. Like, you're running a business, so doing market research, I love that too. I love that I was really interested. We could go on for days because we have so many questions about Depop. So I definitely tell people, like, if you have specific questions, like, reach out to people, reach out to Leah and stuff like that, and ask her if she doesn't know. We're all still in the process of learning, but there's like 500 questions we could go off with Depop. But I do want to bring it back a little bit to kind of focus on you and you as a reseller.
I appreciate Leah for answering, my questions, because I feel like Depop, I just feel like it's special. Like, it's very like, it sits at the lunch table with Poshmark and eBay and Mercari, but it's like a Depop brings their lunch to school while everybody else got to get the school lunch. So that's how I feel Depop is a way, but it's the same. And that's how I like it, because I feel like that needs more detail than the other apps, because it's just very special and it's very different. So that's why I'm like, I kind of want to get this right. I'm not just going to throw everything on there, because everything don't belong on there. Like, that's a special app. But I appreciate you answering, my questions. I'm pretty sure everybody else had them questions out there.
Oh, definitely, because we were live streaming last night and people were like, I haven't sold anything on Depop. And I was like, well, you're going to want to listen to the podcast this month.
Next
wink,
week.
wink, nudge, nudge.
So it was a question that was asked to me, actually. I was in a feature Friday for another reseller on Instagram, and one of her questions was, what is the focus of your business? And I was like, I was writing something, and then I had to like really retract it, because I was like, wait, what is like the main point of me doing this? Like, I had to like really put it out there. So I was just like, I was telling Caitlin, I was like, we need to ask this question to our guests. Like, what is the focus of your business? Like, what is the end thing? What is the reason of why? Like, why are we all doing this?
Okay. That's a really good question. I think, I can only speak about like reselling what I resell. And for me, I think I just love the journey of exploring my own personal style and like bringing my vision into whatever way I have the opportunity to. So whether it's like creating art or styling a photo shoot, which I'm using air quotes again because I feel like I'm not really styling a photo shoot, but, styling myself and giving other people inspiration to style themselves. I mean, I think we all are motivated by financial stuff, and it feels silly to like just focus on that. So as much as I am focused on that, I think for me, I just want to like continue to explore my own personal fashion sense and like develop my trend forecasting abilities and like just develop into more of a force in that way. But I don't really know where this is going to take me. So I don't think I can answer like the end all be all question, but I just, I want to feel confident and motivated to do something. And right now this is just that thing. So
I love that. Like, I love how it's like, it's your passion. So you like, that's what you're into now. And no one knows like where exactly it's going to take us, but like why you started it in the first place. But I feel like once we move into like our future with our business, I feel like it kind of comes together. Like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Or is this the path that you still want to go on? Or like, okay, I set these goals. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. Now, what am I going to do? What are we doing now? Like, what is my next step? So I think that's really important. What is a goal that you're looking to accomplish this year? I mean, after everything we faced last year, pandemic and, just a lot. What is something you're looking forward to this year that you're trying to accomplish?
I think this year, because I have more experience selling on Depop, I'd like to increase my sales a bunch, obviously. But I also want to focus on some of the stuff I was talking about before, like maybe offering trend research or like an online course to other resellers about like vintage and trends and how to predict trends, color palettes, seasonal stuff. I'd like to offer things that are more unique to my abilities than just like, selling the vintage, which is awesome. But I feel like I'd like to incorporate that into other aspects of what I like about fashion and what I like about clothes and pop culture and things like that.
I just say that I'm all here for that. Like, I would be a huge supporter of that, because it's something that I'm interested in and I want to learn about. And I feel like, with courses happening, people are, I don't see why, but people have Poshmark courses. And I mean, it benefits people, but I'm just like, to me, it's very simple, but to the next person, they may want a more structural way of doing it. So I get it. But definitely having a like a Depop course, or like just even if you had like a newsletter every month telling me about trends and like you said, color patterns, like I think that would be amazing. Like I would definitely like root you on for that, girl. And you know, being as though we have you as other guests on for Women in Reselling Month, because it's Women's History Month, and we in the reseller community, we want to uplift women, we want to empower women. So what do you hope to see for fellow women-owned businesses? Like
I think like kind of what we're doing right now, like sharing information, even though we're using different platforms primarily at the moment, I think it's still really awesome to just like connect with other women, especially when we're kind of isolated right now. And I think just like sharing the knowledge, because I think we kind of touched on this before. There's sort of a lot of like people being like, well, if I tell you how I do it, then you'll do better than me. And I think everyone has a different style, aesthetic, and eye. So I think just encouraging people to develop that eye so they are coming up with their own unique visions and curating how they see the world will actually make things better than just, I think you don't want people to copy what you're doing, but I think it's always good to encourage people to find their own voice and share information. I think that's what I want to see. And I think like it's awesome that you guys are so involved in that and encouraging other people to get out there and give it a go. I think on Depop, unlike some other selling platforms like, eBay, for example, there's more of an art form to Depop, which you kind of touched on, and you're sort of more inclined to like curate your stuff and to show more of yourself in your listings. And that goes for even if you're not doing vintage. Like you don't have to do vintage on Depop. I think as long as you're just like expressing your own personal style, you'll do better. So I think I want to see more people just doing that, and no matter what they're selling, just get out there and like show their style.
I think that's important, and I love the way you phrase that. We want to see authenticity in everyone and what they do, and there is room at the table for everyone. No matter if you shop at the same stores, if you like the same items, if you do stuff similar, it's room for all of us. And I feel like when we empower each other, we all win. Versus if you want to downplay or quote unquote hate on somebody, I feel like nobody wins in that. We're women. We all want to see each other win, and I think that's very important.
All right, so Leah, thank you so much for again coming on and helping not only me and Kiaya, but I think a lot of people that are coming to the podcast to learn some more. So that is very much appreciated, and your knowledge is I know you say you're not a pro, but you're definitely a pro in a lot of people's eyes as well, helping break down those barriers. So where can people reach out to you?
My Depop is bestiavintage. And my Instagram is leahbeingleah. And I just sort of post style and shop stuff, just kind of like me as a person over there. So definitely follow. And then my website is leahg.work. That's where you can see some of my textile design stuff. If anyone wants me to make them a pattern, I will do that.
Thank you guys so much for coming back and hanging out with Caitlin and I on another episode of Flip That Jawn. We hope that you enjoyed listening and receiving all the Depop gems with Leah just as much as we did. We hope it provided you with some food for thought to keep growing on your own journey. Next week, come along with us to discuss another topic with our guest Lauren at Pigeon City Thrift on Instagram as she discusses her reselling journey and the impact the reselling community has provided for her. We know it's going to spark some interesting discussions as we talk about life as resellers. As always, thank you guys for listening and learning with Caitlin and I. Let us know what you want to hear next. Leave us a review and don't forget to subscribe to Flip That Jawn. See you guys next week.